Ladies and gentlemen, this is Nikos RPG, and tonight we have a very special episode. We are interviewing the members of the very well established team known as the Heralds of the Change. We are short one member, but I think it's only because the Queen is indisposed. There's been several rumors about her demise, and so we're going to be talking about that a little bit tonight. But in particular, we have with us several esteemed characters from the group known as Heralds of the Change. We have with us the one, the only Luthanin Stormcrow. Thank you so much, my lord, for being here. We also have with us Balif of Tenerife. We don't know much about him, but the buzz about what's going on has been quite mysterious, and we'll find out more. And
Wait,
finally, we
how do
have
you know who I am? How do you what?
I
How do you
happen
know
to
who I
be
am?
I happen to be Throckmorton P. Thidwhistle, a master presenter for the Gnome News Network. So wait your turn, Bolliv. Next, we also have with us Kantuk of the North, a Aruk on the way to unify the northern tribes. This is going to be exciting. So, Luthanin, with the broadcast you just recently made, do you have any first words you'd like to share with our listeners about what's really going on with the Heralds of the Change?
To make Nikos equal for all. Change it for the better.
Please outline your platform. How are you going to make these changes? And if you start to tell me that you were born in a middle class family, I will probably have to shut off the channel.
Worse than that, I was born in the forest, so there's that. No, we have an agreement across multiple nations. We seek to increase that engagement and that partnership with other countries and other nations, and support everybody else and lift everybody up.
Oh, those are very smooth words. Tell me, Ball, if I understand your concern with the fact that we have actually been able to discover your current location, but you have to realize that the gnats of the Gnome News Network are everywhere, and we happen to be quite aware of your potential involvement in this attempt to perhaps destroy the world of Nikos. Is that true?
This group has a name. I just doing my thing, adventuring, and I guess you saw my balloon and wanted to involve me. Looked important. I
Well,
was thinking maybe.
were you or were you not recently taken into the palace by esteemed members of the Luthanen's guard?
The who?
The Luthanen, your esteemed leader.
Oh, is that what they? So I'm not sure what's going on. I was just joining some old friends and finding out some information.
Indeed. So, tell me, Kantuk, what is your plan for uniting the tribes of the North?
Well, that is an interesting question. I was gonna run in there and slap my screen my head off and see how that goes out, and then if that didn't go, I'll go to physical blows because ancient tradition says right next to Mike, and while that is not the way I would prefer to do it, some of my people, that's the only language they seem to understand.
I see.
Sadly.
I see. Lord Luthanen, if you had the opportunity to speak directly to the Imperator, what would you like him to know?
Comment. That's a private matter for me and him to discuss.
I see. So no comment. Is if that's the way this interview is going to go, I can see that you must have some other private resource that is allowing you to convey your messages. Do you have anything to shed about your knowledge of the Raven operation?
What the Raven operation is.
I see. All righty. Well, thank you,
I
gentlemen, for your.
I had an interaction with them, and they took control of me. There's some chant. I think that was.
I see. I think we probably need to call this interview before we get into any suggestion
can I
that
ask
people might be using
one
dark
request?
magic. So thank you very much, gentlemen. All right.
What-
So now
One request.
we're switching in tomato. We're in the meta now, gentlemen. Thank you so much for that little entertaining bit of role play. But so I want to introduce to you, viewers, PJ, Strigley, and Abletop. If in the order which I spoke with them, PJ is the Luthanen. Strigley may or may not be Balif, and Abletop may or may not be Kantuk. We'll just leave it at that for now. So, guys, let's go ahead and actually start the interview show. Thank you for your time. I have to talk to you guys each a little bit. I'm going to give basically each of you the floor for a few minutes. Tell me a little bit about your role-playing history and how long you've been a game player and where you started and all that kind of thing. Starting with PJ.
Started when I was knee-high to my dad, right around 11, 12 years old, 13 maybe. I've been playing ever since. Had a little bit of a hiatus in there. Lost contact with the host here, who is my GM. Lost contact with him because I moved, joined the military, moved all over the world and all that. Lost contact. Kept playing here and there with small groups, and then just recently, like 2-3 years ago, I think it was, got back in contact with you and started playing again, and it's been fun ever since.
Okay. What games have you played? Is it specifically just Dungeons and Dragons, or what other game systems have you used other than D&D and NYCOS?
Mainly D&D and NYCOS. I've dabbled in a little others, but it's not enough to be really of a notable impact. Tried Pathfinder and stuff like that. It just didn't really click and stick with me that well.
Mm-hmm.
Not like D&D and NYCOS has. So.
Well, Strig, I know we've been on and had conversations before, but I don't recall exactly when did you start role playing and all of that.
Role playing itself, it's probably a little bit different than other people. I would have been 8, 9, and it was more like a live make believe world with friends. So it was like like and we'd verbalize what was going on, and then the other person would react to it.
Oh, okay.
So it was like a little secret game sort of society thing we had going on as kids.
Gotcha. So you were doing role play without being in a role play group,
Yeah.
so to speak, and you were
I've always liked choose your own endings and
Mm-hmm.
and things like that. But when it comes to D&D, I've probably only about 5 years or so
Oh, okay. So
when I actually got properly into.
short time ago. Well, I think that we're going to find that Scott's got a little bit longer teeth, so to speak. Tell us, Scott, when did you start role playing? How long ago, and what was your role play experience up till now?
17 years ago now.
Oh my God, that's a long time, old man.
It is a long time, but could be longer. My first experience was actually similar to Strictly. It was a game my brother made up, and we just kind of did whatever we felt like in that moment. We had our own little rule set, and then we eventually transitioned to D&D 2nd Edition, which was my first actual full-on experience with roleplay. Other than D&D, I have done a bit of Pathfinder, both 2nd and 1st Edition, a fair bit of Call of Cthulhu, and then a fair bit of Savage Worlds. So aside from those 3 in NYCOS, that pretty much covers it.
No, that's It's a pretty rich background. As most people know, I've been GMing for 50 years and been involved in all the different styles of role play. Although my focus has always been high fantasy, therefore Dungeons and Dragons, and then now modern in the NYCOSRpg. But let me ask you a different question, PJ. What has been your experience in terms of kinds of sessions of games that you've played in? Do you prefer combat sessions? What about dialogue, exposition? What's your favorite part of the game? I guess what I'm asking.
I've when I was younger playing, it was definitely the combat. That it's always the combat that's alluring to most people, and that's what drug me into these high fantasy fights that are kind of like your action hero in the midst of a brawl that you think they're gonna lose, but they always come out on top. That type of stuff is what got me hooked. As I've progressed through the years and made my way through all different types, mainly like I said, D&D and Nikos, it's gone more to like the intrigue and like the exposition and like working in the shadows and trying to figure out ways around combat without actually and achieving your objectives without actually having combat involved. But
Gotcha.
always having that ace in the hole in that back in your back pocket, so to speak. That way you can revert to that, but try to develop those other skills to try to mitigate the situation.
Okay. How about you, Strig? Which kind or part of the games do you like to play the best?
I like the unique, the quirky, like the different, and the fact that um, I can, as a character, I can explore and do anything. And with a good DM like yourself, uh, I can throw an interesting curveball that's fun, and it's just the interaction back is just as enjoyable.
Mm-hmm.
What was the rest of the question?
Well, just in particular, which part of role play did you like? Are you a combat maven? Or are you more interested in the dialogue between you and other NPCs, or
uh,
the meta of it, the expanded? Uh,
I like dialogue between NPCs, but at the same time, I like the interaction with the world.
mm-hmm.
So and changing it in some aspect.
Awesome. Now, Scott, with your much broader experience in terms of other role play mechanisms, what do you find to be the most enjoyable part of the games and experience in terms of RPG? Are you more a combat guy, or are you about dynamics or conversation, etc.?
As a player, I like finding the similar to Stranger Dam. I like finding the uniqueness of the system and trying to not necessarily exploit it, but at least explore that. Like, I'm in the Slavic world as my example. I like the idea of the interview where a player just has to make something up on the spot, and that becomes part of it.
Okay.
I mean, I enjoy combat as much as the next guy, but the little things as a player are what draw me in.
Okay. I'm going to change the third question. I was originally going to ask you where you started, but we've kind of already covered that. Let me ask it from a different way. PJ, how do you think that you as a player have evolved from your earliest days in roleplay to who you are now as the Luthanen?
Well, I've been there pretty much every step of the way, and you've seen that progression from a little snot-nosed kid sitting at the side of the table trying to play, trying to play, trying to play, and then I finally get my shot, and I just kind of sat in the corner doing the bidding of the more experienced players because I had a stealthy character, so they kind of stuffed me in a hole. All right, do this when we tell you, or when you get this thing, do it. So I kind of fell into that pigeonhole for a long time. That's what I got good at. It's what I built most of my characters around. And even when I tried to branch out, they always seemed to go back to that combat role because that's what I was comfortable with. It wasn't until I got back in touch with you that I started branching out and I started realizing that there's a lot more to a character than just, hey, me strong, me pick up rock, me throw it, bad guy.
That's fair.
So
That's fair.
I've progressed to the point where I'm taking more of a diplomatic approach and trying to weed out that combat focused aspect of it and actually trying to lift the character to have more depth than just, hey, I'm a sharp stick put me in somebody
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
type of thing. So
How about you, Strig? What was your evolution? You were saying that you originally played in much more loosely interpreted role play and a lot more apparently dialogue and such than even the combat aspect. But how do you see yourself evolving as a player over the time that you've been playing?
Well, there have been definitely been able to roleplay, and well, having a little bit of combat, but roleplay is definitely important to me.
Mm-hmm.
I think a big thing was taking on DMing at the start of last year and learning all about NPCs and the world, etc. I've learned a lot about how to, like, all different things that I can have in a character. So I feel like I can put more passion and like more direction in how I want the character to be because I've experienced as a DM lots of different NPCs once I've created, etc. and from modules and yeah.
Sure, sure. So evolution isn't necessarily about what you do in character, which is, of course, the idea of gaining experience and gaining levels and such like that in traditional role play games. But you're seeing that the expansion of the way you think about games has changed as well.
Like I can put more depth in my characters, like more creativity without being generic,
I got you.
all that sort of.
Mm-hmm. So Scott, what's your revolutionary course? I think almost is in some ways associated with your love of other styles of game, right? Because you're also a board games player and a miniatures games player too, as well, right?
Yeah, and like my miniatures games is actually what ultimately drew me into RPGs as a whole, because it can still be there, but doesn't necessarily have to be. As far as my evolution, I'm certainly not as in the shadows as I once was.
Mm-hmm.
I'm coming out more, I'm becoming more comfortable with the idea of expression, and while I still hunker down when I'm put on the spot, that is still very, very uncomfortable.
Kind of
I
like
just feel
kind of like this show.
mm, less. This is not as uncomfortable as other situations I've been in.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good. Phew, I was worried about that. Um, hey, PJ, the next thing I want to talk about a little bit is what techniques you as a player or you as a GM have developed that you pride yourself most on. What things have you done, even in the most recent past, that really you think have elevated your play?
I think the biggest one, and if a lot of these our viewers out there are watching the Nikos Nightly News, they would have heard about the Battle of the Spire with my character Stormcrow. I think that was one of the biggest pivotal moments in my character creation for that character. Because I believe a character is not just, hey, you put it on a piece of paper, all is said and done once you get the background done. No, it's a constant process, a constant evolution of that character. You change, the character changes as well. Your actual life impacts that. But during that fight, the only thing that was going through my head was, hey, these other players are still in the game, but they don't want to give up their characters yet. My character's been around for iterations and iterations in that game, and so for thousands and thousands of years he's lived. At that point in my mind, I was like, if I lose him, I lose him, and it's not about me. It's about what's best for the lore and what's best for the other characters and the other players in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when that switch flipped, where it's like, all right, I need to do something more with my character than just fight, 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 fight. And I was already tipping into that area by talking to other characters, talking to other NPCs, and actually starting to build that background out more of a diplomat than a combat marshal. And when I took that stroke and that dice landed on the table, it was do or die, for lack of a better term,
Mm-hmm.
and it just happened to be in my favor at that particular time. I know it's not always going to go that way, but it brought peace to me that I'm okay with if I lose this character, I lose this character. Yes, it's gone from this play session, but I can then use that character for other play sessions. It's not gone forever. It's just that creation of the character is gone. So
Yeah,
I think that's where it actually started changing me to be more focused on the world instead of just the character's aspirations.
that's fair. That's fair. Hey, Strigly, in terms of you mentioned your games mastery. How do you feel that you've what are the new techniques that you think you've kind of embraced that you didn't have before?
You mean as a game master or
Yeah,
like
yeah.
techniques for the character?
No, as a well, either whichever one you would like to talk about, or both, if you want to. The idea is that you're more than you were when we first met in
Yeah.
terms of both. So
Yeah, from a good part from you and your help. That's how I found about Nikos. Anyway, the I've just lost my thought.
how have you or what are your techniques as a game master now that you have that you didn't have before? What are the thought processes you go through when you're building your story?
Uh, I like. Well, I've got better. It's probably more my organization.
Oh yeah.
Just I feel like everyone as a game master has different things that work for them. Like I use a combination of the program Notion, and I use a Word document, and I'll have where that might be a whole different for someone else. And something like, I'm sorry, I'm sort of jumping topics slightly, but the
That's fine.
like improv was really big for me as a game master. Like learning more with that because I'm able to reflect that back on characters I play, say in your game, for example, and I'm better at improving with them in the moment than I used to be.
Cool. Uh, Scott, what are your what role play techniques, whether you're talking about a character or as a player, have you feel that you've improved or advanced in?
I've become more focused on the world that I'm playing in more. I feel like I'm becoming more of a meta player overall. And as a game master, I'm actually be starting to, through the process of working with different systems, actually starting to better understand like the process of world building. And that's become a little bit easier due to some of the techniques I've learned through the past maybe 5 or 6 years.
Now I'm gonna. This is kind of where the rubber meets the road in terms of a question, and this one seems like it might be a little edgy, but PJ, Nikos RPG and the transition from playing Dungeons and Dragons to Nikos RPG. I'd like your unvarnished thoughts. What you feel about it, and don't worry about it whether it's good or bad. I can take it.
Well, let's lay it on thick then. I think it's a great system for either veteran players like yourself that created the system, veteran DMs, even new players coming into it. It's a great system to pick up, real easy. You don't have to worry about a bunch of math or anything like that. It's just simple dice rolls, percentage dice all the way through. It's it's great for new players, great for uh, veteran players. Like I said, it's easy to figure out what you're doing, how to build that character out. It's all outlined. The bad side of that is it's still fairly in its infancy. It's still growing. It's still everything has its growing pains, just like Dungeons and Dragons did when they first came out. Look how many iterations they're on now. They're on what, fifth edition, I think, sixth edition, something like that. They've gone through
Asterisk.
all. Yeah,
Asterisk.
yeah. They've gone through all of this, and they're still working on it. And that's just part of developing a game and keeping it going. That leads to all types of games, whether you're talking video games, board games, miniatures, all of that. There's no set boundaries to what a perfect game is. It's just what your preference is. And coming over from D&D like I did, when I was first going through it, it may be a little daunting to figure out what stats are supposed to be transitioned to the different stats of Nikos. But once you figure out that basis and you get that rolls down, you're good to go. You can transfer all your characters over just fine. You just got to then think of the mindset that you're bringing over to it. You got to, where D&D is more combat focused and it takes a really long time to get through all that. There's not much nuance and detail in it. Now you're moving into a system that allows that nuance and that deviation from the well-worn road and being able to focus in on what you actually want to do with that character.
All right. And Strig, I know that you started off with the open frame, moved to the more rigid, and then you were shocked into Nikos, I suppose. What is your take on the comparison between the two? And like I said, good comments, bad comments, whatever you got to say about it, I'd love to hear it.
I found it really overwhelming originally. I mean, like any new system, there's different rules to learn, and uh, it's like I realized that I was overthinking it, and it was the challenge for me is it was approaching it from the different mindset, like what John's talked about previously with creativity with Nikos, and realizing that you're not no longer having to fit your character in certain boxes, and you can have them however you want, and to expand your mind with that. I found it was a challenge at first, but once I figured out how I could do that, I found it a lot more limitless. And as someone that likes to create a different character every time they die, and if they die, they die. It's okay. I'm not too bothered with that. But it's just especially the veils, what you can do with it, what you can think, you can try and do. And what got me into Nikos more is that I realized in other tabletops. Uh, the restrictions of not allowing me to do what I want with my character.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, kind of. It's from my standpoint, it's a liberating one. But I know that this next conversation is going to be a little bit more clear. Scott, please. I know that there is a clear distinction between leaving one system for another, and I'm not even talking about that. I'm just wanting to know what your take on NYCOSRpg is in reference to the others, and how it was for you in transitioning for the characters, not for your general play overall.
Okay. For me, it really depends on the when it comes to Nikos. If a group like, cause as a player of any system, if I don't understand though, like where we are in the world, I get confused. And that confusion that didn't make the transition easy.
Mm-hmm.
It took me a minute to figure out how these percentage rolls work, even though I have done systems with percentage rolls before.
Mm-hmm.
But once I figured that out, it was fairly. I still think, personally, and this is not a knock on Nikos per se, but a knock on this type of system in general. If there's a lot of skills, I get kind of analysis paralysis.
Mm-hmm.
That still happens to me when we play. And I realize now that I don't even, unless I really know I'm going to use this skill, I really don't write it down.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
And I don't know what that says about me and the system. I only do the important stuff that I know I'm going to be using constantly. But like, the ancillary, just learning, like smithing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm again just using that as an example. How often am I going to use smithing? I don't actually know because you never know when you're going to need that. So it is a useful tool in that regard, but I still feel like the amount of skills
Mm-hmm.
is slightly overwhelming sometimes.
Well,
But it is a great.
Do you find it difficult to slide back into other systems though once you played? Because I know that's been my personal challenge. Is I went and bought the 2024 DM's guide simply because I'm a a bookaholic, you know. Hi, my name's Jonathan. I'm a bookaholic. If there's a new game system, I'm going to have a copy of the rules to it. But when I look at it, I have a hard time seeing it through anything but the lens of Nikos now. And you and I have
And
talked about
that is you. I personally don't have a problem sliding between systems because I embrace them all.
that's where I wanted to go with the conversation, is that although Nikos is a system that is easy to learn and all of that,
It
if
is
you are
not the only system in my house.
Thank you, Scott. I knew you wouldn't let me down. You would bring the reality to the table, because I'm when I made the change. I've been, like I said, I've been GMing for 50 years, and switching to completely switching to the change to a NYCOS RPG was for me an all or nothing. Not only because I designed it, but because it's a different mindset to me from the role play that Dungeons and Dragons and the other properties that are in the quote commonality. They're all of a similar mindset, and the Nikos is a departure from that. The very thing that you noticed that caused you to get analysis paralysis, ironically, is the same place that Strigley came to, with the realization that you have an infinite playing field, and that's hard to fathom when you've been within a finite roleplay system. PJ, having had his break from roleplay altogether, I think was in a easier place for the transition, because he was already kind of jaded to the long-term combat. I mean, he loved the fight scenes, but he hated the fact that they took so long. So having a system where you could play out an entire combat sequence in a single session was revelatory. I mean, if you asked PJ in particular, and I probably will ask him this, but go ahead, PJ. When we talk about the Battle of the Spires, do you recall how many separate combat engagements we had in that very one session?
Battle of the Spire, going into the mouth, all the way up to the spire itself. I think we had close to 8 or 9 combat encounters in just that one session. We only play for 4 hours.
Yes, and
Three,
how many?
4 hours.
If you remember, what was the average number of opponents in any given one of those encounters? To give kind of a math to it, those people that play role play games in Dungeons and Dragons go, oh sure, if you had 1 or 2 rounds, but how many engagements do you think
We had, on average, out of those 8 to 9 combat sessions, we had probably close to 8 targets individually.
8 enemies against the 3 of you, 8 times. So what, it was about 64, almost, well, closing in on more than 50, almost heading towards 100 enemies. And of course, the last was a BBEG. And
bad.
How long did that battle last?
Minutes, if that. Like, from the point where we tried to attack it the first time to the point where I made the final call of, hey, this is it. I'm going down with it, or it's going down, or I'm going down.
Mm-hmm.
It was a matter of minutes. Like, even just, I think the longest part of that engagement at the very end against the big bad was just putting into words of how my character and my persona was actually acting out and doing these actions, and that took more time than the actual combat itself did.
All right. Now, so as a game master, one of the biggest challenges, and I think you've even GM'd at some point, didn't you, PJ? At some point in the last
very little, very little. But I have
so this question is going to be more focused to Strig and to Scott. How do you go about bringing people to understand the game that you're playing? I mean, if you're talking about literally somebody who sits down who's never played a role play game before, how long do you think that usually should take or does take in a classic system like Dungeons and Dragons? How long does that process take? Strig, I ask you first.
How long it takes new players to get a grasp on it?
Yeah.
You mean?
Yeah.
It depends. If you're using online with D&D Beyond, it's it's a lot quicker because they don't need to learn the modifiers. That I found it could be sessions and sessions. Like it took one of my or two of my players over 10 sessions to realize, even though I sort of explained it to them, that D&D is a collaborative story, because people are just so used to playing an RPG and playing along with the story, but they don't realize that they're actually with D&D and or Nikos or anything really, but you're part of it. In like a role play game, like you're kind of help create the world. You're influencing what you want to go and do. You can do.
Scott, what's been your experience? How long does it usually take you to bring somebody to speed on a game that they're going to play at your table?
I'm gonna put a gauge of 8 to 12 hours because it usually takes them 2 or 3 sessions to fully figure it out, in my experience.
Okay, so what if I told you that I recently timed a group? I actually had their permission, and I timed how long it took to teach them to play. First of all, I'm going to predicate it by letting you know that they are board gamers. They have a lot of experience at the mid to heavy crunch board games like Wingspan or Lords of Waterdeep. So they're familiar with the concept of a role play game, but they've never actually played. How long do you think, given the fast play rules for NYCOSRpg, which I think all three of you might have seen, how long do you think it took me on the clock to have them go from sitting down to actually making their first role play decision? PJ, what's your guess? We'll do a little poll here.
I'm gonna say probably just basing on what I remember the fast play rules and seeing Strigley come in and other players come in and drop into our games. I'm gonna say maybe an hour and a half tops.
Scott, I'm sorry.
I'm gonna,
Tabletop.
I'm gonna say 20 minutes.
Okay, and Strigley, what's your guess? Because I think you and I talked about it, so you may have an edge on this conversation.
I mean, I think if they've played other tabletops, I feel like
They've
Oh,
played
so they haven't?
No, they have not played any tabletops before. They came in playing board games.
I reckon my guess is 20 minutes.
Okay.
Because I just having come from another tabletop game, I feel like that gets in the way of learning a new system because you like revert to that. So being fresh is like an advantage with Nikos.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. He definitely was an advantage because they didn't come in with any of the baggage. You're right about that. But with eyewitnesses, that were players of a veteran nature that were also in the group, I can confidently say that the NYCOSRpg mechanism can have somebody go from never playing a role play game before to making their first role play decision with their character sheet filled out in 6.5 minutes. In the case they were, like I said, they were with the board games group in Redlands, and so they were at Board Games Paradise. So it was live. Scott will like this part. It was a live game, and by being a live game session, there was a lot more direct communication that was possible, unlike the online, which is a little flatter, a little harder to get across. But providing them with a persona sheet, giving them the default numbers of 20 to 45 so they can fast play, fill in those numbers, and then have them pick 2 of the skills from a much shortened list for each of their 2 marks from their race, 2 skills from their place, 2 skills from their estates, and then 2 of their own choice. We had enough to start playing immediately. So 5 minutes, they were actually making their first decision as far as opening the door and going out into the world. It was that fast. And the reason why I mentioned that is that what impact do you think a fast play mechanism will have on role play games groups if the word gets out about the fast play, that you can actually sit down and play right away without having to have any experience in it. What do you think that might do in terms of the world? And I'm going to go backwards this time. Strig, what do you think?
As in the speed of learning the game, how that will influence new players.
Yes.
Uh, I think there's that big barrier of people not understanding how simple it is, and like overthinking it. So if you can explain to people how easy it is to jump in, then yeah, I feel like you get a lot of people on board quickly. I think the more of the challenge is finding people to DM that understand, that can like open their mind broadly and more limitless and come up with things without having the templates that they're always used to as a DM.
I got you. I got you. Scott? I'm sorry, Abletop. I
Yeah,
keep doing that.
the fast play rules, I'd argue that any sort of fast play rules would speed up the process of learning. Um, as far as like, I'm gonna jump on Strictly's point about baggage. Like, I don't think we can avoid the issue of baggage if it exists. But if it doesn't, yeah, it would. Fast play rules would be an improvement, and I think more role play games should implement that. But sadly, they don't.
Well, perfectly candidly, Abletop, I kind of hope they don't because I want to be the only one doing it. So there you go. PJ, asking you the same question. In terms of fast play, how do you think it would influence, say, I know your daughters haven't got a chance to play role play games. How much do you think it would influence them to be able to drop into a game in less than 5 minutes?
From second ed with some homebrew rules, it took hours to set up a character before you could ever play. Figuring out all your equipment, your tools, spells, whatever character you're playing, whatever class, all that. And it was daunting because there was a lot there. Narrowing it down and giving them a funnel, so to speak, allows them to look at just, hey, this is the type of character I want. What do I want to do? Okay, cool. This will lead me to that. Now let's play. And because of the nature of NYCOS, those fast rules lend itself to the actual gameplay of NYCOS because NYCOS is, like you said, infinite. You can pretty much do anything you want. But trying to dive in the deep end and being like, oh, I could do anything I want, and then trying to figure out the rules from there, it will be a little easier. But in the same token, you got that, like both the others were saying, it's that daunting feeling. Like there's a lot that I can do. I could do whatever I want. But if you put a little cap on it, like, hey, here's your introduction, just like an introduction on a book. Hey, it tells you what you're going to cover in the book. Here you go. Do you want to dive in further? And now you already got a character built in 5 minutes. You can take that character and expand on it. But I also want to revert back to the whole NYCOS RPG, what's the unvarnished thoughts and things. That's the other counterpart. When I first jumped into NYCOS, yeah, it was easy to learn, easy to pick up. But then I started seeing how much you could possibly do, and even like it's on the GM and or the DM, whatever you want to call them, to figure out how much you're going to allow the players to run with that. Because I know we've had sessions where we're like, hey, I want to try this, but there's no skill in the book. Then it's on you to figure out, like, hey, how are we going to actually implement this? Because NYCOS lends itself to that, and that adds another layer of, like, ooh, do I really want to get into this? Because there's so much to it. But that fast play is going to open that door. The hardest part is getting your foot through that door.
That's fair. That's fair. Okay, so we've been on for 45 minutes. I do want to reintroduce you guys. I have with me the majority of the group known as Heralds of the Change. They are our Sunday Patreon player group, and I have with me PJ, who's in the green shirt on the left. Then I have Abletop in the middle, and Strigley, who is Balif of Tenerife, on the right. So, having done that, let me ask you guys another question. What are, and this is now switching slightly, we're going back to in-game thoughts. As Luthanen, what are your plans? And this can be as Easter eggy as you want, because this is being viewed by people that are not playing the game. So they are invited to, if they want to go to patreon.com and become a supporter, and therefore become eligible to play in the game. But since you're in a room where there's only you and me and 3 million viewers, what are the plans that the Luthanen really would like to implement?
I'd like to welcome anybody that wants to join. I love large playing groups. It's what I'm used to. That's what I love playing. Yes, small groups are great, but the more the merrier. With that being said, as Luthanen, there's big plans in the works on what I'm going to do with Nikos, and probably up in the lore and shake it to foundations, quite literally.
Come on, dish. It's okay, dish. I mean,
I don't know how much trouble this.
I know you're in a double entendre, because you're sitting in the room with the game master. You're going, I can't give him my plans because it'll ruin it, because the game master's going to mess with me. That is always the dynamic. But in this case, you've got two other eyewitnesses that are from the group. So feel free to just start shoveling. I'd like to hear at least a 1 year plan. What is it that Luthanen would like to do in the next year in game?
In game, eliminate the Alliance, burn it to the ground, remove the Imperator, and then remove the scourge that I've been dealing with as the Luthanen since the 6th iteration for 6,000 years of the bugs. Get rid of the bugs. They've always been the problem. They've always been at the heart of the problem. If that means I have to invoke a very old player from that time, name of Kelman,
don't have to give the specifics as far as that detail, because that I don't even know yet officially. So.
Yeah, I don't either. But if I have to invoke that and get him in and hurl Nikos itself into Nimbus, the sun, to just burn it all away and start from scratch, that's what I'll do. But we'll just see where the road takes us.
Alrighty. I know that Kantuk is on his way to the north, but what is his plan? What is he going to do once he's pacified the tribes and brought them all under one warlord?
First immediate goal is to run circles around Junflaw itself. I mean this literally. We need to actually get rid of this shattered stones nonsense. It is Junflaw, and it needs to be reclaimed.
Reclaiming the nation, yes. All right, that sounds awesome. How about you, Balaf? I know that you weren't aware that you were on the spot, and you didn't even get invited to this party per se. But what does Balaf see in the next year or so? I know that you've starting to study meteorology. What's your plans?
So is this in character, or you just Balaf's an overview?
Well, this is a little bit of both, but yeah, what is it you see happening in the next year or so for Balaf?
I'm going to talk third person. Okay. So he's very sporadic and like.
Oh, so you're
he likes to.
So you're speaking as spectacle. Okay.
He likes to. He finds something that interests him, and then he grasps it and sees where he can go with it.
Mm-hmm.
And he also wants to try and disestablish higher up royalty, so that everyone's at an even plane when it comes to rank in society, and also to expose secret information that others have that could benefit everyone knowing.
I see. So too many secrets in the world. You want to liberate those secrets. I got it.
Yeah, it's more like, why are these powerful upper class important people that shouldn't be important, why do they get to hold the secrets?
That's fair.
It's almost like a slight Robin Hood, but like with secrets.
Yeah, that's fair.
So to
steal from the knowledgeable and give to the ignorant. Okay, I got you.
Yeah, and so I was maybe establish some form of network that does that.
Okay. But I think I see a trend developing where we're talking about three individuals that are trying to enact organizational change within the realm of Nikos in their own way. I think this is going to be an exciting next couple of years of the story. So, let me ask a slightly different question. PJ, where do you see, and this can be for you as the player or you as the character, where do you see the future of your persona and your personal experience with the realm of Nikos? And not just the realm, but also NYCOSRpg as a property.
Well, seeing as NYCOSRpg not only encompasses just the fantasy setting, but there's going to be other settings that are going to come into play, and all that lore is going to be tied together. And I hope that all that lore that you've put together over the 50 years actually makes its way into, like, maybe, hey, here's NYCOSRpg, here's the mechanism for playing. Here's another book that already has lore and setup like D&D does, and it has its own lore. It has all these big characters that you know, all these big beasties that you know, and have come to love from D&D. But for Nikos itself, my ultimate goal for Stormcrow is to go down as a living legend inside of Nikos. Whether that he takes his last breath defending the rights of others and doing the whole Robin Hood thing, or he goes out peacefully like the elves from Lothlorien, leaving Middle Earth to go mess off somewhere else wherever they go because they didn't want to deal with the problems of the world.
Okay, that's fair.
Whichever way, that's what it is. For me as a player, I hope it continues on, so that way I can continue playing. And when I'm old and gray and wrinkly like you are, I can then pass that on to my
What
kids.
wrinkles? What wrinkles? That's why I grew a
Pass it
beard
on
so
my-
you can't see the wrinkles.
So I can pass it on to my kids, and hopefully they'll pass it on and keep the whole trend going.
That's fair. That's fair. How about you, Strigley? Where do you see your persona and your experience with the Nikos RPG property in the next year or so,
Over the next year, or just or further than that?
or further than that? Whichever you want to cover.
I'm hoping that people realize how easy it is, and just how limitless it is, and realize that and find their creativity. But my main thing is that that people get that into it that they end up DMing it, so that once you pass away or whatever, in 50 years or whatever it be.
So two of you want me dead. Okay.
I didn't say that.
That it continues on, and then other people will have the passion to keep it going, because it's very unique and having people think for themselves compared to almost other things in society, really.
That's fair. That's fair. Now I know there's a line I'm going to cross when I'm talking to Scott, because I know he's also working on his own system, and I don't ever disparage somebody from creating. But what do you see your relationship with the story and with Nikos in game, and also what do you see in the future for yourself in terms of developing and producing in terms of Nikos and such?
Game, I actually see, I hope Cantor can unify the tribes, and I hope to come in as a guest character when war finally hits.
Oh, you mean next week? Okay.
Wait, what?
Well, that was meant to be
Okay.
a secret. It was a secret. We weren't meant to tell him.
Shh. I know, but I wouldn't know if his heart could handle it, to know that we're going into the last days of Nikos.
Well,
That's no fault of my own, I swear.
that, luckily for everyone, there will always be a shot. That, my personal experience with NYCOSRpg is to be, kind of like the darkness to your light.
Mm-hmm.
I am your agent Smith. I am your opposite, your negative, your yang.
Well, I don't want
And
to talk
you-
about my yang in public, okay, Scott? So just calm down.
Okay, calm down. But the point is,
Pardon me, that was awful.
there
Alrighty.
is a shadow coming.
Alrighty, we have a couple of viewers. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them. We're going to have a time here at the end of the show where you can provide your questions to any or all of my guests. I'll be glad to share that with them. And in the meantime, we're going to talk about a couple of things. I would like to provide each of the players kind of a parting shot before we get to those questions of anything that you would like to add in particular to our conversation, or even a topic or two that we might want to add that I didn't include in our original outline. And I'm going to go in reverse order. Scott, Abletop, is there anything you would like to discuss about RPGs in general, NYCOS in particular, etc.?
I would offer anyone to try it. However, I'm the one who says try everything. If it works for you, embrace it. As I somewhat have.
Somewhat. There's a qualifier always. I get it, Scott. Thank you. Strigley, do you have any additional things you'd like to talk about that I haven't covered, that I should have covered?
Yeah, it's to do with you've got your NYCOS system and your NYCOS worlds. For me, if I was to DM, I mean, I wouldn't use your worlds, but I know a lot. It's got a lot of awesome content. I'd maybe pick it, but it's that whole the mechanics of NYCOS, which is amazing for me. Like I love your character building and just the theater of the mind. I was going to say something else. Oh yeah, I mean, sometimes you like to be playing a tabletop that's structured and what you have to do it a certain way and fit into the box. But sometimes you just might want to just let loose and do just whatever. And you could. I don't know. I don't know what your options are, but I guess maybe sometime in the future you might even give guidelines for people creating their own races and their own custom homebrew.
Well,
And
it's funny you should mention that because it was something that I was going to mention. In the master book, I've actually added a monster creation section, which you may not have been aware of. And literally, it uses the very same form as a persona, but uses the marks more selectively as the attributes, or I should say, the traits of your creation. So, therefore, you don't have to use the monsters from my list. You could emulate something you've seen in another game, or if you wanted to create your own out of whole cloth, the mechanism allows you to do so in about as few steps as it takes to put together a persona. So you're able to grab those mechanics. The stipulation difference is that I define the difference between a monster and an encounter. So in other words, if you're going to deal with something that is sentient and has a mind, it's going to act much like a persona would in terms of determining which conditions it wants to invoke when it gets the chance and such like. But monsters, on the other hand, are those beings who are solely bent on destruction, and therefore they never default to a condition. They're always trying to deal damage. We just recently had an encounter with our Sunday group. I think it was our Sunday group. It could have been our Monday group, where two of the players were actually critically wounded, and they actually had to go looking for medical help immediately. As a matter of fact, in the big battle that you described, the Battle of the Spires, PJ, you had to worry about, I believe it was Catelyn's health that got hurt pretty bad, and so you had to deal with that. In fact, you were injured, if I recall correctly, in that big battle as well.
Yep,
and
I was.
And the mechanism for that makes the fights with monsters radically different from the fights with anything else. Because if something is trying to destroy you, they are going all out to the wall to actually deal damage, to put you in a hurt locker, to disable you in some fashion. And that's a radically different departure from your encounters, say, with somebody in the city who just doesn't like you. There's a radical difference between those two levels. And so that's described in the master book under monster creation.
so, if I wanted to make a character using this custom system, and I'm maybe, say, an awakened shoe, an old shoe that talks and he has shoelaces for arms, like what limitations would that provide? I haven't actually read the custom stuff myself.
Okay, so The creature you're trying to create it would determine things like how big is it? If is it the size of his shoe? Because then its range with those little laces wouldn't be much. But if it's the size of a bullock or a bison, that's a big beast, and so therefore those laces might be long enough to actually be a threat. Also, what kind of control does it have? Are they flailing and spinning weapons that just are an arbitrary? You get to choose that because you're choosing what traits you want them to have. So if maybe it has a Monty Python stomp, maybe that's what it does. Is it actually jumps up in the air and just pounds up and down on your opponents. That is up to you, and what that represents in terms of the damage type and everything is up to you as the storyteller. So yeah, you have total control over it, and it.
I guess like anything, it's working them with your DM and how they are wanting things to be portrayed in the world that
Right.
they're creating through your system.
Right, and it means that the game master is going to have that same sticker shock, so to speak, that you had when you were given the opportunity to go into an open world that was limitless. When you are limitless in terms of making monsters, A, you're going to go hog wild and make a lot of them, and B, many of them you're going to think, oh, this is too dangerous, I'm not going to use it, So it gives you that opportunity to explore your creativity, but also by putting it in a way that you can compare it to, for example, the attributes of a persona, you can make it make more sense.
I also feel like the loose, the fact that a player is quite limitless in what they do. I haven't DM'd of Nikos, but I'm not sure if you've been a player yourself, or I I was just curious whether, from a DM standpoint, is it harder to run without having that structure of this is how much health that creature has, or this is the thing that's needed for you to succeed with your skill,
Well,
like having.
yeah, that's a really good question. The There are limitations in the game built in. For example, there is an entire section that fundamentally I don't use a lot of in Dark Shards that I might use more so in, say, Dread State, that Dread Signs, that has to do with um, the actual health of your persona. The default is you have 20 ticks of damage, no matter what. But that damage can only be afflicted if they get through the mitigation or the amelioration of your armor, and if the amount of their damage is sufficient to overcome your basic physical resistance, because you have a resilience check. So there actually is regimentation built in, but the game masters kind of have to decide for themselves what they want those limits to be. Are you going to play with a hard and fast wounds track system, or are you going to play more like we do in Dark Shards and play it more fatigue based? But as far as the one thing that really has been most useful is the realization that you can scale your event against your players based on what your players' numeric values are. So as they become more powerful and their numbers in skills improve, likewise your villains can improve by the same factor, so that you can always make sure that the enemy is appropriate for what they're playing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I guess like any new system, it's a DM feeling out how strong to put something in, how to
Yeah.
work within the system to balance it for the players.
Well, I think the reason
And
why I left it that way in particular was to keep in the game the wonder. Now, most of us are jaded because we played roleplay games for 10 years, 12 years, 30 years, 50 years. And by playing in all those different time frames, we get to know those kind of things, and so we tend to lose our wonder about a system. But in the Nikos mechanism, the fact that those doors are literally standing open and it's up to the game master to read through and interpret them leaves a sense of wonder that every player, when he sits down to play with that specific game master, has to be listening to hear what that description is and to comprehend or embrace what that game master is trying to do so that there's a balance. I hope that makes sense.
So,
PJ, I left that last to you. So, any last thoughts or questions you might have?
No, just do what you enjoy, do it with passion, just like everything in life. Don't regret anything. Try something if you don't like it. No skin off anybody's back. Doesn't hurt anybody. I would definitely encourage people to try out Nikos, give it a shot, even if you've never done tabletop or any type of RPG or any type of miniature gameplay, because most of those are a bunch of dice rolls and figuring out math and stuff. But Nikos cuts that, trims all the fat out, and it's really easy to pick up. I would just definitely give it a shot.
Alrighty.
don't overthink it. Just do it. It's a big thing. Don't try and work it out. Just go along with it.
Yes. One of my favorite things to talk about, and this kind of set up our ending, is the idea of yes and. When you learn improvisational humor, you learn that you go along with what other people say, even if it's ridiculous, and you figure out something new to add to it, to modify it or alter it, and keep it within the framework of the scene. And in such like the NYCOS system is built in a yes sandbox. So yes and, but it's also sandbox because you're able to take it where you as a storyteller want to take it. I got one more question for you, and this is for each of you, and I'm going to give each one of you kind of a time limit of 2 minutes to give us an answer, and then I might cut you off. But I'm trying to get us down, try to keep us within our relative time period. I'm going to start with Abletop. Given that you are going to be looking at a role play system where you have a yes and situation, what part of role playing would you like to see improved in any game system? What is the one piece of any game system that needs to be the most locked in, most understandable, and quickest to play?
I would say for me, exploration. I always have a harder time with that because everybody wants to gloss over, like, the journey to whatever destination I've set up. So I would like to see more exploration in role playing.
Alrighty. Now I have to ask you, because you asked that question, you answered that question so quickly. I do have to ask you, what was your experience when you went on an exploration mission to a land that didn't speak your language?
A giant headache, to be honest. It was something I was wanting as a player, but now that I've done it, oh god, I see why we have a common language.
That's fair enough. Okay, Strigley, your turn. In all of role play, if there's one thing that you would want to see most understandable, most locked down, and most easy to transfer, what would it be?
I don't like how a lot of tabletops are becoming more rigid, and this is how you do it. It has to be this way and restricted. So it's for me, it's the freedom of
Freedom. Okay, so
as that
now this image,
creativity
I
and
have this
yeah.
image of William Wallace. Freedom.
It's like it's what I like about Nikos. A lot of other tabletops tell you how to think and how to do it and how to. Where Nikos is that's why it was quite a shock, a system shock. Is Nikos says, "Well, how are you doing it?" And you're so used to being told how, and Nikos, you you think for yourself, and it's yeah.
Okay, PJ, what's one thing that you think is most important that players get a lock on, that the game masters really get a handle on?
Take it, whatever game tabletop RPG you play. Yes, there are some that are more stringent than others, but push it to its limits. There's a phrase that's not always true for certain situations, but rules are meant to be bent and broken. You can't find out the limits of a game without trying to bend and break those rules. See how far you can stress test it, see how far you can take that, and Nikos is a perfect example of that. It went from I went from playing D&D, which is super structured and rigid, and there was no wiggle room. You had to do it one way, and there was nothing else. Going to Nikos, I could be like, well, I'm going to try this. Okay, well, that didn't work. Let me try this. Maybe it has dire consequences, maybe it doesn't. But that's up to the game master, the dungeon master, to be okay with letting their players fail and not being scared to lose players, or their personas, I should say, their characters, not the players themselves.
Yeah, I'm not.
Hopefully you
I don't
lose
like
any
losing
players.
players. That we're doing an entire. I'm going to do next. One of the next videos I'm doing is how not to lose players. There's a real
Not
art to that.
different, I should say, characters and personas.
Yeah, sure, that's right.
Don't be afraid to lose your character persona. It's not gone forever. Yes, it may be gone for that particular story and that particular campaign, but you can always bring it back for a one shot. You can always bring it back some other way, undead, whatever you have. But I've played with John for many years, and one of our game sessions ended in a complete party kill. Like everybody ended. Like that was it.
You're
And it
telling my secrets. What total party kill? When did that? What?
Oh, this is exciting. I thought he
You may have to
was
tell
too
that
soft for
story.
killing
You may
anyone.
have to tell that story because I think Strig would be interested in it. I know that Scott would love to have one over on me. So sure, tell them how that happened.
I'll give the quick version since we're on a time crunch. We were out. We weren't really ambushed. It was ambushed, but it wasn't ambush. It was a betrayal, and we were all caught in a web. And it was another player character or persona that fashioned it and said they wanted to do this, and he was on board with it, and he let it play through. And we played that campaign. I think was going on what 3 years?
2 years.
2 years.
Yep.
And we were playing through. None of the other people in the group, none of the other characters were none the wiser until it was sprung, and then it was over in a flash. Like there was nothing we could do. We walked right into it headlong, and then by the time we realized what was going on, we were all on the ground screaming for our moms. So like we had no choice but to just accept it and okay, let's restart.
And thus the fifth iteration ended for that group.
Yep.
Alrighty, guys. Thanks for being here for tonight. Thank you to you viewers.
Can I
for being
say?
here. Go ahead.
Can I say one thing?
Sure.
Do you also think that it seems odd that something like Nikos, that's like limitless freedom, is less complicated with something that's more closed off and smaller than D&D, or like every other tabletop, basically?
Yeah, I think to me the most interesting thing about it is that the master book, which is right now the smallest of the books that I've written for the property. The other system books are all considerably larger because they cover much more detail of their particular niche. But the master book is smaller in terms of page count. I think it's like 130 compared to 280 for the.
I was 127 last time I checked.
Thank you, Scott, for knowing the page count. You get a BP for any character you want. There you go.
Words of a true fan.
Exactly. I know exactly how many words you've written, sir. But my point is that the entry threshold for most role play game materials nowadays seems to be about $50 or more. So the Player's Handbook, the DM's Guide for Dungeons and Dragons, the Pathfinder 2 rule book, their price point is much higher. The entry point for NYCOSRpg is $40 to get the master book, and therefore you can get started right away at a lower price threshold. And yes, to your point, it's ironic that a game that gives you limitless power also doesn't force you into an itty bitty living space. So there you go. Thanks everybody for being here, and we will see you all next time. Remember, we do record Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. Pacific time and 11 p.m. Pacific time. And also, if you are in the Redlands area, Southern California, feel free to join us Monday nights and Tuesday nights at 6 p.m. and at 2 p.m. on Saturdays. We do Roleplay Roulette. I know that that's not always the case, but all those times are in the Pacific zone because Southern California is the place to live. All right, we'll talk to you guys later. Bye.